Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Kickback. And today I have a very amazing guest with us. So we have Preeti Shetty with us, who is the CEO of Upshot and is the director of Brentford FC. So, Preeti, thank you so much for joining me today to talk everything about football and all the other amazing work that you do that we're going to delve into. But just to start off with, just so that people know entirely what you do and how amazing you are, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the current work that you do, because you really do have quite a lengthy CV.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I've been following you for a while, and yeah, it's a privilege to be part of this. Yeah, so I mean, as you said, I am the CEO of Upshot, which is a tech social enterprise that works with sport organizations to help them measure their social impact. And what that means is we basically provide them with a piece of software and capacity building services to help them articulate the difference that they're making to individuals and communities, mostly using data and digital. We work with just over 400 organizations all around the world. We actually do non-sport as well, but helping organizations understand how to evidence success, how to tell what is working, and importantly, what isn't working. Outside of my day job, outside of Upshot, I sit on the board of Brentford Football Club. I'm on the board of London Sport Trading. I'm the vice chair of a wonderful international development charity called Street Child United. We run something called Street Child World Cup. I'm an advisor for a technology innovation company called Ready Sport Global, and I've recently founded a new company called Valor, which is looking at pay equity and pay transparency for women working in sport. So lots of bits and pieces there, but really they kind of all come together on a few key themes around data, impact, purpose, EDI, community, and innovation, I guess. So while it might look like I'm doing lots of things, I'm kind of doing the same thing, just with a different hat on.
That's interesting, because I was going to ask, how do you even have the time to fit it all in, let alone come up with these absolutely genius ideas? I mean, I'm going a bit off script here, but how do you actually manage your time to do all of this?
Very badly is the answer. I don't manage my time very well, but I absolutely love what I do, all of them. And I think if you are lucky enough to love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. I'm not saying it doesn't feel like, there are days where it feels like work, and there are days where I'm like, I'm exhausted and I don't want to do this anymore. And there are bad days. But most of the time, I believe in what I'm talking about. I love what I do. And for me to get the opportunity to be able to do this stuff and talk about this stuff with so many different sectors and organizations and businesses, it doesn't feel hard. It's tiring, but it doesn't feel hard, because I think it's a privilege, right? It's like most people, I don't know, we're told you spend your life doing a job and you do well and you get a promotion, and and you progress. And for me, that wasn't really my journey. And so I've expanded outwards rather than up. And I enjoy every minute of it. And I really genuinely believe that if if you love what you do, then you can make a really meaningful impact in the world. And that's what I'm trying to do.
I love that. It's such a humble response as well, because I just love that line that you said, that you're expanding outwards instead of upwards. And I think it's beautiful, because it just shows how dedicated you are to creating a transformational positive impact on the world, essentially. So I think that's amazing. I'm going to remember that line, I tell you. It's really good. So I mean, you could have gone into anything relating to management. So what really inspired you to go into sports management specifically?
As with everything I do, it was a complete accident. I didn't, it wasn't a plan. I ended up finding sport for development specifically, really having this epiphany moment where I realized sport can change people's lives, and I want to be part of this, and I never want to do anything else ever again. And then I really looked at, that Japanese concept Ikigai. It's basically the Venn diagram of uh, doing what you love, doing what you're good at, and doing what the world needs. And for me, that's what I found. I found this like perfect middle of the Venn diagram where it was like, oh, working in sport. I was never very good at playing sport, but I love sport. Working in sport and doing what I love, but also understanding that there is room here for me to do this. There is a sector, an industry that I didn't realize was as big as it is. You think about sport and you think player, presenter, coach, manager. Actually, it's none of those things. There are so super interesting roles that exist in our sector that once I found mine, and I'm still continuing to find mine, there wasn't any looking back. And when I realized that I don't have to be a player to be able to have an impact in this space, then it hooked me for life, really.
Wow. That's amazing. I kind of resonate with what you're saying that I stopped playing sports like a long time ago, but to then be able to think about, oh, although I'm not a player, there are other ways that you can actually impact. I suppose it shows the power of sport as well, isn't it? It's not just sports; it's everything that surrounds it and the impact that it actually makes. And I think it's. I mean, sports is just a beautiful thing, and I think a lot of people sometimes don't really realize the impact that sports can have on society and how it is almost like it's almost like a mini universe. And if we mold it right, and if we shape it right, then actually it could truly be representative of the world as well. And I think that's a beautiful thing about the game. So actually talking about social change, what responsibility do you think sports has to creating social change and improving equality and diversity? And that's quite a heavy question, I appreciate, but you're probably the best person to answer it.
I mean, I think we have a massive responsibility. I don't think we can shy away from it. I think now it's become impossible to ignore. Like, we all know all the things and Nelson Mandela quotes about how sport can transform lives. And, sport has a platform, right? Our athletes have a platform. We have role models. It's a universal language. It transcends barriers, boundaries, religion. Like, we know all these things, but it only works when it's for everybody. It only works when I always talk about this. I say sport is a public good and it's for everybody and everybody should be able to access it. That was what it was built for. And so if you look back at those principles of why sport and play were created, we are the ones that decided to have barriers. We are the ones that decided we wanted subscription costs and facility fees and all of these things that we put in place to say, not everybody can access it because you need to be rich enough, tall enough, old enough, close enough, whatever the barriers are. If we go back to those principles, then it's our responsibility to make sure that everybody can access sport in whatever way that is. And that's not to say it's one size fits all. Like as we just talked about earlier, I don't play sport every day, but that doesn't mean it's not for me. I do go to the stadium once a week, but if you don't have to go to watch a game once a week. You don't need to be a season ticket holder in order to love it just as much as the person next to you. And I think for me, our responsibility has been enhanced, has been made even greater now because society is not in a great place. Like things are hard. There's a massive cost of living crisis. People are struggling. There are wars. I think sport is not only, it used to be seen as a bit of an escape. It's now more than that. It's a chance to build bridges. It's the chance to level the playing field. And if we don't take that opportunity, I think it would be a real shame because it definitely has the power to do it.
And do you think that the players recognize that level of responsibility as well? Or do you think that that's starting to happen? Because we do have a lot of players who talk about particular issues, whether it's political, whether it's EDI or whatever it is. Do you think that it's enough for them to just talk about it, or do you think that they have a role in trying to create a change practically?
It's a really interesting question. I think female athletes have always done it, have always needed to. Female athletes are activists in their blood by design, because women's sport has never had the same platforms, the same investment, the same eyeballs. And so they've had to fight for everything. And women's sport has activism built into it, has social change built into it. I think male athletes have a choice. I don't think they all need to, no. I think where you see them do it, and there's obviously some great examples, that comes from lived experience, that comes from their understanding of, either how hard their life was or how hard it can be for other people that look like them or sound like them or come from where they come from. We are seeing a change, yes. I think we're seeing a lot more. I mean, the US has always been better at activism, athlete activism, than we have in the UK. I think we are seeing a switch, yes. Like I definitely know a lot of players who care, are interested. I actually think all players care. I think the problem with it is, not everyone is an activist. Not everyone can speak publicly on a subject. I also think cancel culture means people are scared to talk about things that they're not experts in. I've definitely had conversations with white players that, while I know they're allies, don't necessarily want to go speak on the radio about it, because if they get it wrong, the backlash is so severe that it's not worth them getting it wrong. And partly there's a fear of not knowing the exact right word or getting it exactly right. And so I think they care. Yes, I think it's our job as clubs, as a community, as organizations to support them. Remember, a lot of these are very young people. It's a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Most of them just want to play their sport. But they're being put in these positions where some of them want to be and some of them don't, where their opinion matters more than an expert in this area. And so I think if we want them to speak up more, to use their platforms better, I think it's our job to help, empower, facilitate, and make sure that we're not super hard on them when they don't get it exactly right, but instead teach them how they can do better.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point that we also have to protect the players, because I feel like a lot of the time the players, whilst they want to speak out about it, they do fear that backlash and the impact that it happens on them. Like, will they lose their contract? Will it impact their transfers? Will it mean that they're not going to get another another club transfer or whatever it is, or a contract renewal? So they kind of have to think on both sides, like, can I continue to be a player if I speak too loudly about this?
Yeah. And we've seen examples of that, right? I was just at a conference in Munich this week, and we heard a wonderful kind of Q&A with Colin Kaepernick, and he was saying, again, it wasn't like an active choice necessarily, in that I'm going to do this and I'm going to lose my career. It was like that's what he felt was right, so he did it. But what's come out of that, years, I mean, I didn't realize he said it was 7 years ago. In my mind, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It was 7 years ago. And so, you look around and you're like, I've just made it. This is my dream. Do I want to give all of that up? Potentially and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people do think that this is an issue that's not mine. Right? I think when you're fighting about, Marcus Rashford, it's slightly easier in some sense, because he's talking about his own lived experience, his own experience of free school meals, his own experience of growing up in those communities. I think when we're asking players to do it on behalf of other people, allyship, white players to talk about racism, men to talk about women, it becomes a little bit harder if we're not giving them the tools to do it, and we're not providing them with the safety nets to educate themselves, to empower themselves, to gain awareness, and also to get it wrong every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I've got to say, I'm absolutely loving this conversation. Like, it's so deep and it's so meaningful. And I think these are the kinds of conversations that need to be happening, like, more in the open, and we do need to be more transparent about it so people can understand, and especially fans as well, because, like, I feel like as if sometimes the fans on the pitch, like we've seen it recently with like Argentina, Brazil, and all of the violence that kind of can come with the game and everything like that. And actually race and inequality has been such a big part of the game now. It gets talked about everywhere, which is amazing. But I want to bring it home a little bit, because we don't get to see, like, I don't get to see very many people who look like me, who are in the game, either playing or being big shot directors like yourself. So, I mean, how would you describe your experience as an Indian woman in sports and management? And like, what kinds of challenges, barriers, but empowerment and successes, fueled you to get to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny when I look back a little bit. I think we're in a very different place now than we were, I don't know, when I started my career 15 years ago. I did a lot of, and I still am, do a lot of first and onlys, the first of something, the only something. And that, that has its own challenges, right? It can be an emotional burden to have to speak on behalf of all Indian women, all brown people, all people under 40, whatever it is that you're talking about. And nobody wants to be the only or the first, because if you get it wrong, then there's a real fear that nobody else will want people like you. And so I guess that's hard. Like, that's a challenge, because I'm like, I feel the pressure quite a lot to like do something meaningful with it. Like, what happens if I finish my I don't know, my stint at Brentford and I haven't done anything meaningful? What happens if I get off one of these boards and I haven't really moved the dial on anything? So there's that fear a lot, is like, and sometimes that fear can be paralyzing, because when you can do, and Brentford is such a wonderful example of this, like, they're, they are such an open club that are really willing. They want to do good. They want to involve their community. They want to be inclusive. Like, there's no barriers there. But sometimes I feel a bit paralyzed, because I'm like, oh, if you can do anything, what is it that you do? And we have a amazing director of equity and inclusion at Brentford. She's called Kamini, also South Asian woman. And she said to me, it doesn't have to be a big thing. We can do 5 small things. Like, the pressure to do something big sometimes can stop you from doing anything at all. And what we try and do with the club is lots of little things. And you have to embed this stuff, right? You have to do it from the inside. And to be honest, when I look at it now, like, off the pitch, South Asian people, Indian people are doing pretty well. Like, we have at Brentford, I'm not the only Indian person on the board. I'm not the only brown person on the board. It's amazing. It's really nice. It makes me think they want me for me rather than my gender or the color of my skin. Generally, when I look around sport and football, Indian people off the pitch are doing okay. On the pitch, I think we have a lot more challenges. Like, we're not really seeing the representation player or coach-wise, but again, there are programs that's changing. I think the thing I found hard, maybe I sometimes still do, is the pressure you put on yourself more than anything else. But it's not that I haven't had a bad experience. I've had many, lots of sexism and racism and banter, as we call it in the game. But nothing that's ever stopped me from, for all those bad ones, I've had loads of good ones. I felt incredibly included. I've had doors open for me. I've had seats at the table, and when I have them, my big job is, how do I ensure I'm keeping the door open for everybody else, right? But there's a rule: when there's 3 of you, that's when you really move the dial on something. Because 1 is like, oh, there's a lot of emotional pressure. 2 is like, oh, it's just the 2 of you talking to each other. And then 3 is like, oh, actually, this is when we're, what we're saying counts. And so I think that's the goal. Like, across everything I've done, I'm like, I don't want to be the only. I don't want to be the first. Even if I'm the first, I don't want to be the only. But it's trying to ensure that we're leaving legacies that mean that, and role modeling is a huge part of it, that other people look at us and go, oh, well, if she can do it, I can do it. Because every time we do that, there's a little girl somewhere that's like, oh, I can be her. And I think that can be incredibly powerful, because one day we'll hopefully get to the point where we don't have to be having these conversations, because there's enough of us. But I also think it's incredibly important not to get bogged down by the Indian versus, or the South Asian versus, because this is not a competition. And that's why we talk about not using the word BAME very often in the sector. There are different issues for different people, and I think as long as we're looking at EDI and equity and inclusion, then there is space for all of us. And it's not about Indian people making it, and I don't know, Black people not making it or Pakistani people making it and, whatever. And I think as long as we're looking at it from that lens, which is this is a game for everybody, there's space for everybody, then I think we have to create the opportunities. They don't just happen. And I think the way opportunities happen is by having representation at every single level, because only we know what we go through, right? And so if I don't have people from other backgrounds, then I'm making decisions based on my own bias, and that's not particularly good either.
So, but why do you think that we've got to this stage that we do have to talk about it, that we do have to, have like it on like application forms and looking at how we're recruiting, and why have we created this environment where we're saying, hang on a second, why isn't there diversity? Hang on a second. It can't be right that nobody else has these qualifications, that nobody else can do this job. Like, why do you think it's happened?
I think sport, football specifically, but sport in general, it's very traditional. It was built by men for men. Those structures still exist, that infrastructure still exists. I don't think it's because men don't want us there, or I don't think it's because white people don't want brown people. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's just a little bit historical, and people stay in their jobs a long time. And when you have a good job that you love and you're comfortable in, you don't want to make space for anybody else. I've actually seen women like this in the industry. They made it, and so everybody else should work as hard as they did. And I don't get that. They had their elbows up and they don't know how to put their elbows back down again, right? And it's like, and I think now, because the numbers are so stark, because now it's so blindingly obvious that we can't pretend that, oh, they didn't apply, oh, there's not enough people, oh, they're quite hard to reach. Now we can't make those excuses anymore because the numbers are so shameful, to be honest, that now we're having to say, well, you know what, if we can't fix it on our own, if you can't fix it on your own, then we're going to have to start to build programs and quotas and all of those things, because sport should be representative of the communities that we live and work in. Sport is not representative of the communities we live and work in. There's, one Black board member in the entire Premier League, and he's on our board. There's, I think Niti and I might be the only two South Asian people. There's only 9 women. These numbers are not representative. And so when you look at it from that perspective, I think we're forced to now do something about it. I think the other thing that's happened is, there's research now there. People recognize that diversity is good for business. No one's doing anybody a favor here. And actually, it's good for everybody if you have a diverse board, not just race or gender, but age and diversity of thought. And so when you're working in a competitive landscape like sport is, you want to have the highest performing team on every, on the pitch and off the pitch. And so when you start to think about it like that, you're like, yeah, I want the best people. And the best people don't look exactly like me. But in order for the best people to join, someone needs to leave. And that's the problem, is that, either we push into the rooms or we wait for everyone to die. But we'll be here a while if that's what we're waiting for, right? So I think we're at a little bit of a head where it's like something needs to give, and either you get up and make way for other people, or you'll find that they'll take it anyway. Now, again, not take it because they don't want you. That's not what this is about. It's not about othering. We want you and we want us, because there is room for all of us here. We just need to decide what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
And, I have a real bugbear about people focusing on boards. Oh, it's so great to have diverse boards. Actually, it's your exco you should be looking at. It's that C-suite level, the people that are paid the highest. That's where I want to see women and people of color decision makers working in the game day in and day out. Board members are relatively easy to find. A lot of them are unpaid. So, it's good for their CVs. So I kind of think we're focusing on the wrong things. There's also loads of entry-level stuff, loads of entry-level diversity programs. Great. Do those people ever get promoted? Because it's very easy to have people at that lower level. And I think they're great programs. But where are the programs getting people from middle management into senior management? Because unless we're seeing that happen, we're not really seeing change.
It's really interesting, and it reminds me of a quote that I was told quite recently, and I can't for the life of me remember who told me this, but they said women have like a glass ceiling, right, that we have to break through, But if you come from a ethnically diverse background, it's no longer a glass ceiling, but it becomes a concrete ceiling.
Yeah.
How do you think that, how true would you say that is? Like, considering what you just said about, how many people get promoted, how true do you think that is?
I mean, look, it's hard. There's no doubt it's harder. There's no doubt. I think anybody that says that it's exactly the same is kidding themselves. There's no doubt it's harder because the intersectionality of it means it's hard for women generally. For a woman of color, it's even harder. For a woman of color that has a disability, it's even harder. For a woman of color that has a disability, is Muslim, and potentially from an LGBTQI background, it's nigh on impossible. And if we don't recognize that, then we're kidding ourselves. It's not impossible, but it's way harder. And then when you put that into perspective, this is already a hard industry. We work evenings and weekends. It's not easy to break into. There's a hierarchy. There's an inner club network of people that know each other. There's nepotism. There's all this stuff. So already it's quite hard to break into when you've then got all these additional things, and then you have to work harder at your job, harder than everybody else sitting next to you. And then you look at the data around mums coming back to work, women that are carers, all of the additional burdens that you don't even see your colleagues going through because that's just something that they do outside. I mean, we're not setting them up to succeed, are we? Like, it's hard. And this is where equity comes in. If you're saying, well, everything should be equal, but it's not equal. And it's, for a white man who went to a great school with money and a great education and an incredible network, it's a little bit easier for him than it is for this woman I just described. And if we don't recognize that we have to give a little bit more to those people, at least for now, then we get to equality. But we're not there yet. And so for me, I find it, you're right, the glass ceiling, it's not a glass ceiling for everybody. And it's like, there's this saying, and I'm going to get it totally wrong now, but it's like, we might be in the same ocean, but we're not in the same ship. It's that thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not, and I've had many conversations with women about this. It's like, oh, us women should. It's not us women, we're all different.
Yeah.
And I can't speak, my experience has not been the same as yours or anybody else's. And so I don't think there's no template here for how it works. I think what we do is we look at the structural inequities that exist, and we try and fix that to give opportunities firstly, but also to put in fail safes for people that have it a little bit harder so they can succeed. Because I'll tell you what, when they succeed, and there's so many brilliant examples of people in our industry that have, my God, they change it for the better. And I would rather a world with them in it, or a sector with them in it, than them without. So, but yeah, you have to do the work, right? And for me, the work is not hire a head of EDI, there you go, job done. Or write a policy, job done. That's not it. You have to work at it. You want a more diverse workforce. You want your organization to be inclusive. You want us all to have a great time at the stadium, then work at it. And I'm not sure that all sport is willing to do that work at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting again that you say that, because I feel like as if whilst we have the conversations, there still seems to be because it's target setting essentially at the moment, isn't it? It's target setting, but it's target setting without an understanding, like you said, of lived experience. So it's about being able to say to these people who are in positions where you can make meaningful change, to say, do you truly understand the perspective of all the people in order to make that meaningful change? So programs and everything are yeah, that's great, that's that meets your target, great publicity to say we have this program to do this and do that, but is anybody actually understanding the experiences, the true barriers and everything like that? And that's one of my bugbears with all of these programs, is that nobody's actually understanding. They're talking but not understanding, which is
and a big part of that is listening, right? It's like, who are you talking to? Because if we're just talking to each other, if clubs are talking to each other, or sport organizations are talking to each other, saying, you know what we should do to... I had a very interesting conversation recently with an NGV that was like, oh, we've been discussing for months and we've been building these great programs about how to engage older Jewish women in whatever the sport is. And I was like, oh my God, that's great. Like, where did you find these Jewish women? And they were like, oh, no, we've been talking to each other. And I'm like, what do any of you know about an older Jewish woman's experience? Like, that makes no sense. But that's it. It's like we have spent a lot of time and money talking about this to each other. And unless we really start to go out and engage the people that we're trying to reach, I don't think this stuff is going to work, right? And then, yes, then it's about putting money and budget and capacity and ideas behind it. But it's not for us to decide what a different demographic of people need. If, I remember having this conversation a few years ago with a woman, an older Black woman, on the train near Brentford. And I said, oh, have you ever been to a game? And she was like, why? I hate football. And I said, all right, why do you hate football? And she was like, it's just not for me, right? Like, I'm not interested in football and I don't want to go. And I was like, all right, fine. And then we talked about other stuff. And it turns out she's really interested in young people and education. She used to be a teacher. She talked about loads of stuff she does for the community. And I explained to her what our community trust does. And I was like, actually, we do loads of work in schools. We do loads of stuff around mental health. We do loads of education programs. We do loads of stuff around health and well-being. And she was like, oh my God, I had no idea this was happening. I thought football was football. And I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding that most sport organizations do way more than sport. And we are part of most are part of the community, and we want to add value to our community. And it's very much outside of what happens outside the 90 minutes, right? And I saw her after that at a community event, and she was like, oh, I bring my kids, it's great. I engage in all of these different ways around food and culture and music, not football, and that's fine. Not everybody likes the same thing, and that's okay. Our job isn't to sell football tickets to everybody. Our job is to build more cohesive societies and communities where we understand each other and we're listening and we're talking, and part of that is going to a game, but part of that might be a school assembly, right? So yeah, I think sometimes if you're not in it, you don't fully see the extent of the reach that sport has.
No, I completely agree with you there, and I would say I'm probably like one of those people as well, because I discovered women's football quite late, I'd say, which is such a shame for me. I was like, why didn't I discover it earlier? I got into it on the recommendation of a friend. She's like, I think you'll really like it, and I did. Now I've dived headfirst in the deep end of
Get out.
and absolutely love it. But actually this leads me on to my next question, I suppose. Like, how do you think the environment in sports and roles around sports has changed for women and those of minority backgrounds over time? So you've been in this industry you said you started your career 15 years ago. How have you seen things change over time?
I mean there's been quite a lot of change, right? Like, I think namely on the pitch. Like, I think women's football is a great example of how just the momentum in the last couple of years, like, we're not going back from that. It's extraordinary. And, we're seeing little boys with football shirts with their favorite female player on. And that's a generational shift that's not going to go anywhere. I think the product has become better. Like, the sport on the field has become better, and that helps. I think the investment is growing, and that helps. I think off the pitch, there is a recognition that we can't continue, as I was saying before, we can't continue to not include women, that we make up half the world's population. We're often the biggest consumers. I think there's a recognition that this is good for everybody, and so we need to start thinking about how we engage a female audience, how we build a better female workforce. So it's actually it's quite a good time to be a woman, because I think we've moved past the point where we're still explaining why, at least in the UK, that we're explaining why we should. I think everyone gets that we should. We're now moving to what that looks like. And it can't be exactly how you thought it, right? So for me, yeah, massive difference from when I started, which was, you needed the right people to open the doors for you. You needed the right people to vouch for you. You needed to be the first one there and the last one to leave to prove that you really cared about this thing. That stuff has changed. We have some brilliant female CEOs in sport. We have some brilliant role models and change makers that, you watch them and you're like, yeah, this is there's no denying how brilliant they are. And so, yeah, there's been a massive change for me. And I think that's only going to improve. That's only going to increase as we see, unless, again, unless we are trying to make them fail. Like, I think, and there's so many, I was thinking about this recently. We keep saying, oh, there's another glass ceiling that women have broken, right? It's like Etta, the first female assistant manager at a Champions League game. We've got Lydia Bedford at Brentford, the only woman in the UK to manage an under-18s boys team. There are so many brilliant examples of these change makers. But when will we stop calling it change maker? Because it's like
Be normal.
it'll be normalized, right? It's going to be normalized because it's like, oh, there's another brilliant woman who did something great. Because she's great, not because necessarily she was a woman. So yeah, I think we've come a really long way. But there's a long way to go. I think 3 days ago, 2 guys got arrested for misogynistic chanting at Rebecca Welch, the female referee, and they actually got arrested. So that's a sign we're moving in the right direction. The fact that they're still doing it is a sign that we have a long way to go.
And you see that quite a lot on social media as well. Like anytime you see like BBC Sport post something about the women's game, you'll see. I see it all the time. It really, really gets to me, and I have to really hold back and not comment. Because I'm like, do you know what? It's fine. That's their own understanding and ignorance, whatever. But you see constantly these men just commenting saying, who? Oh, she's not this and she's not that, and oh, they wouldn't be able to last against a group of 15-year-old boys and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, do you know what? Why even compare? Because we know that the men's game and the women's game is actually
totally different products.
Completely different.
They're completely different products, and we want them to be, right? And we need to treat them differently. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you're always going to have people that have whatever their silly opinion is on something. But I think we're getting to the point where it's becoming undeniable. Yeah. You can say what you want to say, but the numbers are speaking for itself. And so, you know what? As long as that investment is coming in and the athletes are being supported and the clubs are being funded, then I don't really care what so-and-so from blah, blah, blah thinks on his Tuesday night in front of Twitter.
Yeah, true. So, I mean, strategically, so like putting on your strategic hat, how do you think, and what do you think is the best way to actually increase the diversity on the pitch, strategically speaking?
On the pitch. Oh, interesting. Look, on the pitch, it starts with grassroots, right? Like we need pathways, we need more grassroots opportunities, we need more funding, we need better facilities. But also you need to be able to show girls that there is somewhere for them to go. And until those pathways, which they're being developed now, the emerging talent centers and Wildcats, and obviously the amazing job the Lionesses have done. We have them now. There's sport, and sport in school is an incredibly important thing. But yeah, for me, on the pitch, we're not building the Lionesses of tomorrow, we're building the Lionesses of 10 years from now. And that takes a whole lot of investment and time and effort and energy. But it's not just players, where the referees, where the coaches, like all of that stuff needs to be built out. So there's an ecosystem for these young girls to thrive in. And that's going to take a while. And we are moving in absolutely the right direction, but it's not going to happen overnight. So yeah, on the pitch, it's coming. But if you look back 10 years, you'll see why we're not there. It's because nobody was investing in it then. Whereas now we are starting to, so 10 years from now, hopefully that will look slightly different.
Yeah, I also feel like as if there's a perspective that people tend to not talk about, which is the perspective of family and parents and that sort of thing. Because generationally, and when you think about, ethnic minorities moving countries because of, everything that's happened in their home country and things like that, having to start from scratch, and then the parents thinking about, oh yeah, we need to be able to make sure that you've got job security and everything like that, which then essentially means that you're almost taken out of the realm of arts and sports and everything like that, because it's not deemed as job
secure. Yeah, it's not secure. I mean, that's why we become doctors, lawyers, engineers, and pharmacists, no?
Thanks for
No, I mean, listen, listen, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, I do think that is changing too, but no, I think you're right. When you look at the percentages, the stats around who makes it, it's a tiny proportion of people who make it, even in the men's game.
Mm,
And so, as a parent, I'm sure I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to try and speak for them, but I imagine, especially a parent from an ethnic minority background, we haven't seen that much success especially in certain sports, especially not for our women. And even where the women have succeeded, it's, you know, they're not financially secure through it. Most of them have second jobs. They have, careers before and after it. It's not necessarily the poster child of do this and you're going to make it for life and you're going to be rich and you're going to be stable. And so, yeah, I totally understand why it's not something that's massively encouraged. I think that again is the job of our sector to build out those pathways, not just for players, but apprenticeships and jobs. And, as I always say, you might not make it as a player, but the sport is still for you. There's many other jobs you can do this in the sport. You can be lawyers in the sport. You can do marketing. You can do IT. You can do finance. You can do HR. You can do commercial and sponsorship. We need to start getting better at talking about those things as careers, because when we say work in sport, yes, athletes, sure, give it a good go. But working in sport it can be an incredibly lucrative career if you pick the right thing, right? And I think that's not something that we necessarily shout about. Like, how many, I don't know, Asian people are, well, first of all, we have no players, which are very few players, which doesn't help. But, you know, the administrators are not on TV talking about how great their life is. So why would a parent that hasn't played themselves, that hasn't engaged, think, oh, that's a great career, go be the CMO of a football club? Like, that doesn't feel like it's for us, right? But it is for us. And it's a job like anything else. And I always say, like, do what you're good at, pick the skill you're good at. It could be physics, it could be food. There is a job for you in sport.
amazing. No, I completely agree. And I'm discovering that slowly myself. And I think the more that you kind of talk to people, the more that you network, and especially like with organizations such as Sporting Equals and that sort of
Yeah.
thing, it really shows you the diverse amount of roles that there actually are, where you can actually have a place within sports when you're not a player. But it's really also great to see the work that the South Asian players are doing. So, people like Millie Chandarana and Chanel
Yes.
Sultania, like
Kira. Yeah.
Kira Rai, absolutely. I'm like absolutely in awe of them in terms of like they'll play the game week in, week out, but they also dedicate so much time and effort to really trying to create a change and really trying to make sure they're visible to others so that those
Yeah.
who are younger than them can see that they can achieve it. But
And
what we're seeing is that they that we need it at that elite level, like the
yeah,
high levels.
yeah, we do. And the media plays a huge role here. Like, big shout out to Dev Trehan at Sky Sports. Like, if we're not seeing it in the media, then we don't know it exists. And for me, the work that Dev and that Sky Sports team are doing to really talk about these stories and bring these stories to life and shout about all of these players and all the stuff they're doing. If you're not seeing that on TV, you're not reading about that in the news, you don't know who these people are and you don't know the good work that they're doing. And so I think it works on every level, right? It's like that visibility and what you're doing, right? It's like you're telling stories.
Mm.
And that visibility is super important because somebody might see it through this channel that they might not have ever seen anywhere else because they're not interested in football, because they don't, it might be somebody that's another pharmacist or in the healthcare space
Mm.
that suddenly is like, actually, I really love sport. Oh, I didn't know you were doing this. And now I know all about this new breed of people that are doing things. So yeah, I think it's super important that we have it at every level, that we're investing, especially in the media, to bring out these brilliant stories, because there are brilliant stories.
Mm. So I want to do a bit of a pivot here because you do have so many job roles and so many hats that you wear. So your main job is running Upshot. So can you tell us a little bit about it and how it actually supports non-profits to get more comfortable with data and digital?
So that's my main job, what I do for a living. And basically, we're a tech social enterprise. We work with just over 1,400 nonprofits really looking at their data to help them measure their social impact. And the idea with it very much is, there's brilliant work, especially in the UK, but we work internationally too. There's brilliant work that the charitable sector, the third sector does, interventions they deliver, whether that's a mental well-being session, a social isolation session, a Monday night football session, dance, arts, knitting, the list goes on. How do we know that it's making a difference? So we refer to it as the so what question. Okay, so you did a session and 20 people came, so what? How do we know that you're actually changing behaviors, attitudes, physical well-being, mental well-being, whatever that is, social development? And so a lot of what we do with our organizations is provide them with the support to get comfortable with collecting the data, understanding the data, analyzing the data, and then making the case for themselves. Like, a lot of our organizations are publicly funded, and so they have to prove the impact that they have, but also supporting them through their journey of telling their story, right? It's like and in sport, this is very common. We know we do a good job because we see it every day, but how do you put that down on paper? How do you explain that to somebody? How do I articulate why you should give me money rather than the next charity sitting next to me who's just as good? And so, yeah, we spend a lot of our time, and it's really wonderful because our organizations are so different from each other. And so we get to see the real breadth of the work that's happening around the country, in sport, in physical activity, but also through youth work, education, the criminal justice system, healthcare, and also how they intertwine. So yeah, love what we do, mostly looking at data and tech, but also just capacity building within the third sector.
Is it qualitative and quantitative that you collect?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, because the sports sector has traditionally been quite good at qual.
Yeah.
And that's great. We want you to keep your qual, but just storytelling without backing it up with data, we're starting to move away from that, where we want both, right? And so we're really supporting organizations to be able to tell the stories, but also talk about the data in a much more meaningful way.
And obviously you're also on a number of boards. Can you tell us why you choose to give your time as a non-executive director or a trustee? Like, what value do you see in that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I love being on boards. I think it gives me something that I don't get in my day job, I guess, right? It's like, for me, I look at it three ways. One, I'm learning something that I'm not getting from my own business. So I'm improving my own skills, my own CV, my own expertise. For a really good example of this is finance and governance. Like, it's not something I'm particularly good at. I run my own business now. It's important for me to know how to manage risk. It's important for me to understand how to read a P&L really well. It's important for me to forecast better. So being on these other boards, I'm really getting to see how bigger or smaller businesses do this, and people who are experts in this field. I'm learning a lot. My second one is, where can I add value? Obviously, there's things I'm quite good at, especially in that impact measurement space. It's a big area for charities. They struggle with data. They struggle with digital. If I can provide some help, something that they would otherwise pay a lot of money for, then why wouldn't I do that? Like, it's a way for me to give back, using skills I already have. And then the third one for me is cause related. Like, I think there are boards that I'm part of where I just absolutely 100% believe in the cause. And, lots of people will have that. You might have a person that's suffered from cancer or diabetes or mental health issues or whatever that might be. I think that's a reason to join a board, is I'm giving back to a cause I really believe in. And so for me, my work with Street Child United is very much around, I 100% believe in the cause. I volunteered for them for many years. I had life-changing experiences with the young people that are the Street Connected young people I met. And so for me, it was like, I just want to be part of this organization's journey. I want to raise money for them. I want to keep doing this. I believe in the work that we're doing. And so, yeah, for me, I think it sits between the three. You're giving something, you're getting something, and you just believe in the cause. And the three are not mutually exclusive.
And you mentioned Street Child United there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What kind of work do they do, and how far do they go?
Yeah, so we're incredible international development charity based in the UK. We run something called the Street Child World Cup, which is a big event that we do before the Football World Cup and the Cricket World Cup in the respective countries that they happen in. And so we were just in India for the Cricket World Cup, and we were in Doha last year for the Football World Cup. And the idea is we bring teams of street-connected young people attached to an NGO, and they come. So in Doha, we had 328 young people.
Wow.
They come, they play their own World Cup, so they represent their country. So we had a team India and a team Brazil and a team Mauritius, and they come and play a World Cup. They then learn about and advocate for the human rights of street children. So we have 4 pillars that we really look at when we think about street children. At Street Child United, it's access to legal identity, protection from violence, access to healthcare, and a lot of what we're looking at is what is it that these young people need, and they talk to each other about it through the event. We use arts quite a lot and music quite a lot as well. So they play the World Cup, they talk to each other, they learn about their human rights, they advocate for their human rights, and we end with the General Assembly, where we invite the ambassadors from their countries to come and hear their demands. And it's an incredibly powerful thing. We've had some really incredible impact over the years. A lot of what happens during events is we have young leaders that go through a young leader program. We have legacy projects that get funded for these young people to go and do projects back in their own communities, in their own countries. And so it's really about empowering young people to be agents of change. Specifically looking at the rights of street-connected children and using the power as well.
That's amazing. That's so powerful as well. That's incredible. Wow. It really, really sounds so powerful.
It's amazing.
It's empowering.
2026, we're always looking for volunteers, by the way.
Is it? Okay. Consider me one of them. Because obviously I love charity work. It's definitely it's one of my passions for sure, just trying to create that positive impact. I think people don't really realize the value of doing like such good work and how it kind of inspires the people who are actually in the programs. Like I still remember when we did like a Christmas party for homeless people, and we had all this spare food and we were putting them into plates, and then one of the homeless people, he came and then he started putting food onto plates as well, and we thought he's going to take it away with him, and we're like, oh, yeah, please feel free to take it. He's like, no, I want to go take it to those who couldn't come, and he was like, yeah, you guys really inspired me. And so he took it himself, and it was really sad. It's one of those things that I won't ever forget, because we gave everybody like socks and hats and everything like that. He's like, oh wow, I'll get a fresh pair of socks this year. I've been wearing the same socks all year round. So it really is powerful. It really is a powerful thing. So I'm going to be a bit more selective, because I know that that we're on a time crunch here. So
or like rapid fire, one sentence answers.
I'm gonna jump right to the last question, actually. Okay. So finally, what advice would you give to those women who have a passion for sport and want to break into the industry?
I think for me, it's like saying yes to everything. Like I really, when I look back at all of the things I've done, I mean, I should have said no to some of them probably, but I've always just said yes, and I've always tried something. And I'm like, okay, if I don't like it, I never do it again. But how do you know unless you've tried? And if you told me I was going to run my own business and I was going to be on the board of a football club and I was going to start a new venture, now, and I was going to travel the world and do these things. I didn't pick any of these things. They kind of just happened because I was really open to opportunities. And I think just be open to the opportunities that come and say yes and try everything once and give it your everything. And that the stuff that's meant to happen, your ikigai, your why, you'll find your why. And that's the stuff that will stick.
I'm going to circle back to one more thing. But you said earlier on that, you liked sports, but you never played sports. So how did you actually become director of Brentford?
I actually love this story. I saw an advert on Sky Sports. I saw an advert on the internet. I applied because I could, because the club went out to open advert, and that's how you do diversity well. You don't just send it to your friends and the people you know, and you don't just go to a headhunter that only knows the same people. You put it out on the internet and you see who applies. The other thing is the job description, to be honest, wasn't very difficult. Like they didn't. First of all, they didn't ask you to play sport, thankfully, because I'd be rubbish. They kind of said, they want people that care about the same things they care about: community, purpose, impact, women and girls, inclusion, the club, the sport. I care about all those things. So I looked at it and I was like, I have that experience. I can do those things. And I think sometimes when you put too many barriers in place where it's like you have to have 15 years of experience of blah, blah, blah. Why? Why do you have to have that? And I had board experience previously, and I've obviously worked in the sport. I never worked in elite sport. I'd only ever worked in grassroots sport, but the JD didn't say you have to work in elite sport. It said sport. And I think that's a really great example of how if you leave things open and you don't put these barriers in and you cast the net as wide as you can cast the net, you get people that you might have never been on your radar. And then obviously, then you go through the same due diligence process as everybody else, right? And, I did a ton of interviews at Brentford. But the fact is, I saw an advert and I applied because it wasn't written in a way that made me think, oh, I could never do that. And don't get me wrong, I thought I would never get it. But I still applied.
Yeah.
It was open enough that I felt like I could apply. And I think that's really important. And, the small things you can do, for example, on my Upshot job vacancies, I never put degree requirements because I don't think you need a degree to do this job. And I think it's all those little things that for years we just put. And actually, do you really need them? Because it's about people, right? And it's about values. And I think as long as you look at it that way, then you open it up for so many more interesting people to come into your world, into your club, into your family.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. So apply.
Apply to everything.
Apply everywhere.
What's the worst that's going to happen? You don't get it. So what?
Exactly.
So what?
Yeah. I love that outlook because, like you said, it's just about opportunities and you're not placing any expectations, but what you are doing is you're giving yourself a chance.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So, Preeti, I just want to say thank you so much for such insightful conversation. It's been absolutely inspirational to sit here and talk to you. And I just want to say thank you so much for giving me the opportunity because when I reached out to you, I thought, oh my God, I'm not gonna hear anything back. This is a big shot director of a football
Definitely
club.
not. I've been following you for a while. So I was very excited to hear from you, and I'm really glad we got to do this. And I have no doubt that we will be seeing more. I'll be seeing you next week. But we will be seeing more of each other.
I'm so glad. Honestly, I'm so glad to have met you. So, but I hope everybody listening to this has felt really inspired because I know I have, and I'm really excited for the future because if we have leaders like you who are leading this industry to better places, then I know that the future is looking very, very positive and very kind of hopeful. I feel hopeful.
Love it. Good word. Thank you so much. And I will see you very soon.
See you soon.